What's up y'all, welcome back to Fish the Moment. Today I'm preparing for another Catch 15 challenge. This week we're heading to Beaver Lake in Northwest Arkansas. We'll be there in the first week in November. And Beaver Lake is a very challenging fishery. It's the hardest lake I fish for these Catch 15 challenges. In the last challenge I did out there in August, I actually managed to catch 16 pounds, which was a big surprise. And I was catching with a hair jig on offshore ledges. However, in November, the fishing on beaver is even tougher than it normally is. And I look back over the years to all the tournaments I could find that were fished in November, and I only saw 2 bags in that time that were weighed in over 15 pounds. That means if I'm going to catch 15 pounds, everything has to go perfectly. I have to execute, put all the fish in the boat that I can, make sure my areas, my tackle are set up perfectly for the day. I need to have a really good game plan going into this fishing trip. And that's what I want to show you in this video, how I game plan for a tournament situation or a situation where I need to go catch 5 quality bass. I'm going to start with some map study and then show you all the baits I'm going to throw. Then that way, when you watch the Catch 15 challenge video, you know exactly how I prepared. Let's get into it. Let's start with my map study for this trip. Again, we're fishing in the first week in November, and that means that the fall transition is in full swing on Beaver Lake. One thing you might think about doing then is going and fishing some of the major creeks, maybe going halfway back to 2/3 of the way back into a creek. However, I found on Beaver Lake that I don't catch that many quality fish when I start going back into the creeks. Instead, I get better quality fish when I stay more towards the main lake. Therefore, the areas I'm going to pick are going to be main lake focused. One factor I do have to take into account is that Beaver Lake is a highland reservoir. This means that a lot of the banks in the main lake are very steep. Now, while you can catch fish on bluff walls during the fall, I usually have a lot more success on shallower, flatter areas. Therefore, the area of the lake that I picked out on Beaver Lake has a combination of shallow flats with steep drop-offs out in front of those flats. The water visibility in this section of the lake is between 1 to 3 feet of visibility. And if we actually take a look at Google Earth and then take the lake down about 6 or 7 feet using some of the historical images when the lake was really low, you can actually clearly see some of these big flat areas. If we compare that to what shows up on Navionics, you'll see the creek channel is sitting out here 50 feet, 40 feet, something like that. And then it transitions from 40 to 50 feet of water up to 2 or 3 feet of water on these flats. Now, if you don't know how to take the lake down on Google Earth, I'll leave a link to a video I made explaining how to do that. And it's very helpful in this case because we can actually see all of the subtleties from the cover to the depth changes on these flats. A few of the key things I'm going to be focusing on when I look at flats like this are any places you have a creek channel or a ditch running into a flat. Here are a couple examples of where an old creek channel or a ditch cuts into the flat and provides a little bit deeper water in those shallow water flats. In some cases, you even have some cover like rock piles or brush that's right up against that ditch or that creek channel. This is an ideal place to find schools of fish on these flats, and it's the exact type of cover I looked for while studying the map. My goal with this fishing trip is to try to target as many isolated underwater pieces of cover as possible. If we put a pin on one of these rock piles and take the lake back up, you can actually see that this rock pile is out in 4 to 8 feet of water away from the bank. And if you look at the bank itself, it looks pretty unobvious. It's kind of boring. There's no major rocks or stick-ups on the bank. And a lot of guys will just fish right over these rock piles on these shallow flats. But because there's that deeper water, that ditch right there, the bait fish will move in on that ditch and they'll follow it and then stop off on those rock piles to feed. Ditches are probably one of the most overlooked pieces of structure any time of the year, and especially in the fall. I find that a lot of my best fishing days happen around these shallow flats with ditches running through them. The ditches, again, may only be 4 to 5 feet deep, and then the flats up on the top are going to be 1 to 2 feet of water with mixed cover like rock and brush. And I basically went around this whole section of Beaver Lake and found as many of these objects as possible, then marked them with pins, and actually I'm going to transfer all of those pins to my fish finders. And again, the video I linked earlier has a complete guide on how to transfer your waypoints from Google Earth onto your fish finders, and I actually have a free guide on my website too, fishthemoment.com, that shows you the whole process for every single brand of fish finder on how to transfer those units. So definitely check that out. Now that you know the types of areas I'm going to be focusing on in Beaver Lake, let's get into some of the baits I plan to throw on those shallow flats and ditches. My number one bait in this scenario in the fall is going to be a medium diving crankbait. It's a super versatile tool that imitates shad, and as long as there's some wind and some cloud cover, I should be able to get a lot of bites on this bait. And even if it's sunny, I should still be able to get some reaction strikes if I can get around some rock piles and brush. The reason a medium diving crankbait for me is such a great tool in the fall is that I can throw it up in shallow water, let's say 1 to 2 feet of water, but also I can work it out deeper in 8 to 10 feet of water, especially if you have the right crankbait. Now, I've experimented with a lot of different medium diving crankbaits over the years. I'm kind of a crankbait addict, especially those medium and deep diving crankbaits. And the one I've landed on that's my favorite is this Megabass Deep X 200 crankbait. It's on the pricier side, but it definitely has advantages over any other crankbait on the market that I've tried. The main advantage is that it casts so much further than any other bait. It has this weight transfer system that Megabass calls LBO. I'm not sure what that stands for or what it means. All I know is that it works. And I've actually gone out and tested this bait on a soccer field and cast it around against different medium diving crankbaits like a Strike King Series 5 crankbait, a DT10, crankbaits like that, into the wind and also with the wind at my back. And I can get at a minimum 10 to 15 feet more casting distance and sometimes 10 to 20 yards more casting distance with this crankbait than all the other medium diving crankbaits I've tried. There is something about the way that it transfers weight, the weight of it, everything just gets more distance. And the reason that's really important for me when I'm fishing a crankbait is that a crankbait only is effective when it's at its maximum diving depth, when it's actually making contact with the cover. There are times when you can catch them in the middle of the water column, but most of the time you want that bait to be getting down to its maximum depth and hitting off cover. And the only way you're going to get it down there is by reeling it down to depth. That means that a third of your cast is usually going to be taken up by just reeling that crankbait down to its maximum depth. Therefore, the longer casts you can make, the longer that bait's going to be making contact with the bottom, and you're going to keep that bait in the strike zone a lot longer. So that's why I go with this crankbait, just for that casting distance. It also has a nice bill that doesn't get hung up at all, and I can fish it really shallow and deep. So a lot of good things about that crankbait, and that's just the one I go with. To maximize the casting distance on this bait, I usually go with either a 7'2" or 7'4" medium heavy action crankbait rod. This is a Denali KOVERT Lite. I just picked this up just to try them out. So you guys know I have a lot of older rods and reels, so I've been trying to pick up some new rods from different brands, and I really like this new Denali KOVERT series. I have several of them now. They seem to work really well for me. And it has a parabolic bend, nice soft tip, 7'2" medium heavy crankbait rod. Just lets me cast that bait even further. And I'm pairing that with a 6-3-1 Abu Garcia Black Max reel, 50 bucks, and I'm throwing this with 12-pound monofilament line. I always crank with monofilament. I'll make a video someday about why I do that. It's kind of complicated, but I like mono for cranking. It's just some Sunline monofilament, and that's pretty much it for this setup, and it should be a really good tool for me to put some fish in the boat on those flats. The next bait I'm going to have tied on is a shallow diving crankbait. And the reason I'm going with a shallow diving crankbait and a medium diving crankbait is that usually these shallow Squarebill crankbaits deflect better off of wood cover. If I find myself fishing around some laydowns or isolated stumps, I'll go to the Squarebill crankbait to avoid hang-ups. I'll usually go to the medium diving crankbait more around rock, or if I need to fish a little bit deeper, and I'll go to the Squarebill if there's some more snaggy cover. The Squarebill I'm throwing is just a KVD 1.5 Squarebill. Everyone knows this bait. It's silent, chartreuse, blackback. Caught a ton of fish on it, and it just works. I don't really worry too much about diving or casting distance, with these Squarebills, because they dive to depth so quickly. You don't have to really worry about them getting down to depth. So just a $5 Squarebill gets the job done, and it's going to deflect off cover and come back to the boat pretty much every time. And if I do get hung up and lose it, it's $5, break it off and get a new one. So no worries there. I'm pairing this with another new rod that I got from Denali. This is a Denali AttaX series. Just picking up a bunch of different Denalis to see what I like, and it seems pretty good so far. I kind of bought it for a jerkbait. It's a 6'8" medium heavy action rod, but it has a moderate tip to it, so it's got a lot of bend, which is good. And I think 6'8" could be good kind of pitching that Squarebill around shallow logs and stuff. So haven't thrown this rod yet. I'll give you a report back in the next video if I like it or not. I'm pairing that with a 6-3-1 Abu Garcia Black Max reel. Again, $50, nothing expensive. and just some 14-pound monofilament line, some 14-pound sunline monofilament. Has a little bit extra stretch, which helps me when I want to rebound that crankbait. When I pop it free, it'll pop that bait. If you do like the boomerang effect, or what do you want to call it, the archery, I don't even know what you call it, but you snap your line, it'll pop that crankbait free, and it works better with mono for me there too. So again, I'll make a video explaining why I use mono. There's a lot of reasons, but that's just something there that I like to do. So that's my Squarebill crankbait setup, and that's what I'm gonna be throwing around any shallow wood. Next, let's move into some of the slower moving baits that I plan on throwing. My only reaction baits I have tied on, at least initially for this trip, are gonna be those 2 crankbaits. And if that's not working, let's say we get really sunny skies, post-front conditions, something like that, I need some baits that are gonna work through these areas a little bit slower. First is my Fish at the Moment Offshore Jig, 5/8 ounce football jig. You guys have heard about this about 1,000,000 times now on my channel. I designed this jig for jewel to come through rock and brush better than any other offshore jig that you can throw. I plan on throwing this in 4 to 10 foot of water around isolated brush piles, rock piles, stuff like that. And I just pair that with the brand new Jewel VersaCraw Jr. We actually have this new VersaCraw available on Tackle Warehouse, so check them out. It's a really versatile jig trailer that works on a lot of different jigs, and you'll see it a couple different times here on some of the baits I'm throwing. Just pairing that on one of my classic rods. I don't know if they even make this rod anymore, but it's a 7'4", a heavy action Quantum Smoke S3 rod. It's just a 7'4" heavy action rod. It has a nice strong backbone to it, so when I set the hook on that jig and cover out deep, I can bring them into the boat. Pairing that with 17-pound Seagar Invisex fluorocarbon line and a 6:3-to-1 Abu Garcia Black Max reel. Nothing crazy there, pretty simple. So that's my football jig setup. Next up, we have a bait that's kind of a cross between a reaction bait and one of those slow moving baits like a jig. That's a swing head. This is a 3/4 ounce swing head that I just bought off of eBay because they're cheaper that way. And it has a 4/0 hook with a Biffle bug on the back, a Larew Biffle bug. This is a Sooner Run color. This is a great bait when you're trying to cover water on those offshore flats, especially if there's rock down there in 3 to 8 feet of water. I go to that 3/4 ounce head so I can really reel it quickly through the rocks and stuff like that, but it also stays down there well. A lot of guys I feel like go too light with these Biffle bugs because they don't want to get them hung up, but I find that the heavier head will get more reaction strikes and cause a lot more commotion down there. I'm pairing that with a Denali 7'2" heavy action rod, another new rod I picked up, KOVERT series. I'm trying to pick up new equipment for you guys so I can show you rods again that are available on the market so you can actually purchase them. I'm trying to not use all of my old Quantum rods. They're like 10 years old. I kind of put those aside and got these new rods because I know you guys like to be able to pick up some of the equipment I talk about. And if you do want to purchase any of the equipment I've talked about in this video so far, I really appreciate it if you went to my website and went to the Support Fish at the Moment tab and used my Tackle Warehouse affiliate link. All you have to do is click on that link on my website, and once you get to that page, just bookmark it. You can just click a little star on your browser, add it to your bookmarks, and that way every time you visit Tackle Warehouse through your bookmark bar, you're going to be going through my link and you'll be supporting the channel. I get a small percentage of the profits for anything you buy there, whether it's rods, reels, line, electronics. So definitely use that link if you want to help support the channel. It's pretty much free for you guys other than just a little bit of time to go to the website and check it out. Okay, back to the equipment. So I got that 7'2" heavy action rod. I like a 7'2" rod and a heavy action because usually it's going to have very little tip. This rod is like no tip to it at all, and that's great for the swing head because you're basically going to be reeling that bait straight in, and when they bite it, you don't want to have to make a big hook set. You just want to be able to pull into them, and if you don't have a lot of give in the rod, if it has just basically very little tip and a lot of backbone, you can usually hook those fish better on the swing head like this. So that's why I went with this rod. And I'm pairing that with a Mag Jaws Cast King reel. It was 60 bucks. I got it on Amazon and it's working really well. It's a 7-to-1 gear ratio reel. I want a little bit faster gear ratio reel with this bait just to keep it going over those rocks. And I'm pairing this with some 18-pound Sunline FC Sniper. I went for the little bit heavier line, not 20-pound test, because I do want to make sure I can keep that bait down a little bit deeper, but I'm going 18-pound test, and that works out really well, so I don't get broken off in the rocks. Next up, we have a new bait and a rig that you don't see me throwing very often. It's something I start picking up in the fall and the winter a lot more, and I haven't thrown it on this channel that much at all, but it's something I love to throw, and that is the old ball and chain, the Carolina rig. When fishing gets really tough and you cannot get bit, a Carolina rig is the way to go. It's very cumbersome and a pain in the butt to rig up. As you can see, I can barely get it in camera here, but basically what I have going on here is a 1 ounce jewel rock Carolina rig weight. It kind of has like a football head shape, which comes through the rocks really, really well. Have a little bead and a brass stopper with a swivel. And then I'm tying that to about a 3.5 to 4 foot Carolina rig leader. I like a long leader on my Carolina rigs. I always have, seem to get more bites that way. And my main line here is some 20-pound Seaguar and Vizex fluorocarbon. And then I'm throwing some 12-pound Sunline FC Sniper fluorocarbon as my leader right there. And it's about 4 feet, 3.5 feet. And then down here at the business end, I have a 3/0 Gamakatsu offset worm hook, just a standard worm hook with a new creature bait that I want to try out. I just picked him up off Tackle Warehouse. It's the Riot Baits Vigilante. I literally have to read the package because I've never thrown these before. It's the Vigilante. It's kind of a cross between like a baby brush hog and like a lizard style bait. It's pretty interesting. I really like it. I think it's something that's a little bit unique, a little bit different from what I'm usually throwing. And I'm gonna just give it a shot to see if it works. I'm not super picky about my creature baits. As long as they have a bunch of appendages and they're about this 4-inch size, I'm pretty happy. So we'll try this one out and see if it works. With my setup, I'm just throwing a 7'6" heavy action Quantum Smoke S3 rod with a 6-3-1 Abu Garcia Black Max reel. And I already talked about the lines, so that's good to go. One thing you do want to be careful of with these Carolina rigs, by the way, is when you store them, I always put a rod sleeve on this. I didn't have a rod sleeve on here to start, but I will twist my line like this around the tip to keep that weight from knocking around. And I've actually broken several rods. When that weight is knocking around on the rod, it'll create a weak point. So I'm just gonna grab one of these rod sleeves here, and whenever I'm going to the lake, I always put a rod sleeve on my Carolina rigs. That way it keeps that weight in place. It won't knock around as much, and you'll save your rods from getting broken or getting a weak point in them. So I'm just gonna put that down there carefully. Not try to tangle too much stuff. For my final slow moving bait, I have something that's a little bit more finesse, and that is just a black zoom trick worm on a 1/4 ounce jewel squirrel head shaky head. This is kind of my backup in case I don't get any bites on the football jig, the swing head, or the Carolina rig, and it's kind of my last resort. I don't expect to catch very many big fish on this bait. I have caught some big ones in the past, but it's more of just a bait to put a couple keepers in the boat if I really need one. And a lot of times I might not even get keeper bites on this on beaver, because there are a 15-inch size limit there, so I'll catch a lot of 12 and 13 inches on this bait. So if I pick this up, it's gonna be kind of a tricky deal. I may not actually complete the challenge if I have this in my hand, but I always have it on the deck of the boat just in case. I'm throwing the black zoom trick worm just because we're fishing in dirtier water, 2 foot and less of visibility. I went with green pumpkin for the other baits, basically, or like peanut butter and jelly. That's a good color and like 1 to 3 foot of water visibility. And I'm just pairing that with a 7'4" medium heavy action, or actually just a medium action, 7'4" medium action Quantum Smoke S3 rod, just with a 20-pound Sunline braided line main line, and then I have an 8-pound Seaguar and Vizex fluorocarbon leader, and I just tie that with an FG knots and leave about 30 or 40 feet of line just between my braid and then that leader. And that's pretty much it. And it's just an old Quantum Smoke reel that they don't make anymore. It's a 30 size. And those are kind of the baits I'm gonna focus on. Those are the 6 baits I'm gonna focus on when I'm fishing those offshore flats. Again, there's a lot of brush, rock down there, and 4 to 8 feet of water. And if I can get bit on, especially the jigs, the swing heads, and the crankbaits, I should have a pretty good chance of having a 2.5 to 3 pound average on those areas. They usually have really good fish in the fall. I don't really fish beaver that much in the fall because it's so tough, but on other lakes I fished, those flats and offshore flats are definitely the place that I catch my bigger fish. So hopefully these baits will help generate those bigger bites. And just in case that shallow flats pattern doesn't work out, I did prepare one backup strategy. If we go back over to Google Earth, you'll notice that up and down the river, the section of river that I plan on fishing, there are some main lake boat docks. And there are times on Beaver Lake that I fished in the late summer, kind of September, October, where I can catch some really big fish on these main lake boat docks. The back ends of those boat docks tuck up right against the riverbank, and they might be 2 or 3 feet deep behind those boat docks, and then the actual floats of the boat docks are over 20 feet of water. My plan is to try to fish the walkways behind those boat docks if I get a limit on those flats, because a lot of times you can pick up 1 or 2 big fish on those docks. You're not gonna get a ton of bites. You may fish 30 docks and only get 2 bites, but usually they're pretty good ones. For the bait I'm gonna throw on them, I'm gonna be skipping a finesse jig. This is actually a hand-tied finesse jig. I use the Jewel 7/16 ounce tactical finesse jig. This is a tour tactical, has a heavier wire hook with a double cable weed guard. And I hand-tied it with some double thick living rubber skirts. This is a thick rubber that I hand tied, it's brown, and I get a lot of big bites on this jig. If I get bit on this jig, it's going to be a good one around those docks. I'm pairing that with a Green Pumpkin Jewel Versacraw Junior, and that's a nice little package to skip around boat docks. It should definitely get some bites if I get it around the right docks. Pairing that on a 7'4" heavy multi-purpose Denali AttaX series rod. This rod I think is like a scrounger head rod. I kind of got it for that, but I wanted to test it out because I haven't thrown it that much, and I'm going to try it with this finesse jig, see if it's a good skipping rod. It does have some tip to it, which should help a little bit for skipping. We'll see how it goes. And I'm just pairing that with an Abu Garcia Black Max 6-3-1 reel with some 17-pound Seagar Invisex fluorocarbon. So kind of going back and forth between the Sunline and the Seagar. I don't really know exactly which one I like better. I found that the Sunline for me has a little bit better abrasion resistance around brush piles and stuff like that, and around rocks. I still have some extra Seagar back there, but I'm thinking about making the change. Let me know in the comments below if you like Sunline or Seagar better. I know there's kind of a big divide in the community about which one people like, and some people like even other brands. I'm leaning towards Sunline a little bit. I'd like to hear your opinion. But other than that, guys, those are the baits I have tied on. Seems like it took me a long time to go through 7 different baits in some of the areas, but hopefully you guys enjoyed these prep videos. I know it's a little bit longer than what I normally do. It's just me talking about equipment and stuff like that, but let me know if you like this style of video down in the comments below. I like making them because I feel like it's helpful showing you the preparation I do and give you the thought process behind why I'm picking certain baits, colors, rods, stuff like that. And also I sometimes leave out some of the details with equipment. I'm a lot more detail oriented about areas and electronics and stuff like that, and I kind of see equipment as almost like a second thought or kind of like something I think about after all those other things. So if you want me to go in more detail about equipment in future videos, just let me know what you want me to talk about, and I can definitely go in more detail. So anyways, guys, thanks for checking out this video, and I'll be posting that Catch 15 video later this week so you can see how I do on Beaver Lake with these strategies. Thanks again for checking out the video. We'll see you all in the next one.